Hey there. Thanks for stopping by. Before we dive into today's story, let me know where you're watching from and how this video makes you feel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I didn't cry when they handed me the envelope. It wasn't the kind of sadness that demands tears. It was quieter than that, denser, like a fog settling in your lungs. I stood in the hallway of the house I grew up in, the walls still dressed in framed moments I was never a part of. My mother, Elise, stood by the kitchen counter, arms folded, eyes already moving on. She didn't offer a smile, didn't offer a word. My brother, Caleb, honked from the driveway, impatient in the luxury car he'd gotten for his birthday. Not his first, not even his favorite, just another gift to prove he mattered more. I turned 18 that day. No cake, no hug, not even a glance that said, "You belong here." Inside the envelope, a one-way bus ticket. "To Austin," she said, like it was a prize. "You're an adult now." The words landed heavier than the paper ever could. I stared at the slip, bus leaving at 9:20 a.m. the next day. No note, no instructions. Just the message between the lines, "You're not wanted here anymore." I felt my fingers clench around the ticket. My breath stalled, not out of panic, but something colder, like I was freezing from the inside out. I glanced up at Elise. Her face was blank, practiced, distant. "Guess I should be thankful," I murmured. My voice didn't waver. That was my only win. She raised an eyebrow. "Most kids don't get this kind of opportunity." Gratitude. That word landed like a stone. I turned and walked upstairs. My room looked unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone who used to dream. The posters felt like lies. The colors too bright. I sat on the edge of the bed with the ticket still in my palm. The silence screamed. A part of me fractured in that moment. Not broken, but changed. There would be no begging, no pleading for affection that never existed. I was leaving, and they'd never see me the same again. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I watched the shadows crawl across the ceiling, counted the seconds between each tick of the clock. I'd packed hours ago, a small duffel bag with enough clothes to get by, my sketchbook, and the old leather journal I kept hidden behind the dresser, the one with my real thoughts, the ones no one ever asked to hear. By dawn, I was sitting by the window, knees pulled up, watching sunlight bleed into the corners of my room. It looked soft, golden, and too kind for what the day was. It felt like the house was holding its breath. Downstairs, the world moved like nothing had changed. I could smell coffee, hear the faint scrape of toast being buttered. Elise didn't knock, didn't call up. She never did. When I came down, she didn't even lift her eyes from her phone. "Bus leaves at 9, she said flatly. "I know." That was the last thing we said to each other. My dad, Michael, wasn't there. He'd left early for work, like always. That was his escape route. Vanish when things got heavy, show up when the dust settled. I used to resent him for it. Now I just accepted it like weather. And Caleb? He was outside, polishing his car like it was the most important thing he owned. Maybe it was. He looked up when I passed, smirked. "Big day, huh?" he said, like we were buddies, like he hadn't spent years making me feel invisible. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. No one offered a ride. No one asked if I needed help. I walked to the bus stop with my bag over my shoulder, heart hammering in a rhythm I didn't recognize, part fear, part freedom. I kept waiting for the ache to hit me hard, for my knees to buckle, or for that final wave of doubt to stop me in my tracks. But it never came. The Greyhound smelled like old vinyl and too much air freshener. I found a window seat near the back and sank into it, hugging my backpack like a shield. The bus groaned to life, the kind of sound that feels like goodbye. Outside the window, my street blurred into a stretch of road I didn't know yet. And still, no tears, no turning back. I didn't know anyone in Austin. I didn't have a job lined up, or a safety net, or anyone waiting on the other side. All I had were small design gigs I picked up online, a folder full of unpaid invoices, and a list of community colleges I couldn't afford yet, but hoped I could one day. But I also had something I'd never had before, a clean slate, a chance to build something that wasn't shaped by Elise's coldness or Caleb's spotlight or my father's silence. I didn't have much, but I had enough, and sometimes that's all you need to begin again. The city greeted me like a stranger, indifferent, fast-moving, sun-baked. Austin was louder than I imagined, more chaotic, more alive. But beneath the noise I felt something else, space. Not just the physical kind, but the kind I never had back home. Space to be someone different. Space to exist. I used the address I scribbled from a rental ad, room above a bakery, no lease, pay cash weekly, and followed the bus map to the edge of a neighborhood that smelled like cinnamon and concrete. The bakery sat between a laundromat and a dry cleaner, its awning faded by the sun. I almost didn't go in. Something about knocking on new doors still made me hesitate. But I reminded myself, no one was coming to rescue me. If I wanted to belong anywhere, I had to make the space myself. Ruth opened the door with flour on her cheek and kindness in her eyes. "You must be the girl who called about the room," she said. Her voice was calm, like warm tea. I nodded and handed her the folded bills I had tucked in my hoodie pocket. She didn't ask questions, didn't press for details, just handed me a small brass key and pointed to the narrow staircase in the back. "Sheets are clean, bathrooms shared, quiet hours start at 10. That was it. No interrogation, no suspicion, just trust, freely given. The room was small, barely enough for a twin bed, a desk, and a cracked window, but it felt like mine. I opened my bag, placed my sketchbook on the table, and sat down on the edge of the bed. For the first time in days, I exhaled fully. I spent the next week drawing during the day and working online at night. Logos, flyers, small commissions from people I'd met on forums. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy groceries, enough to keep the lights on, enough to not need anyone. And then there was Marianne. She'd messaged me after I submitted a branding concept for her startup through a freelance site. A quick thank you turned into a longer email, then a follow-up, then a question I didn't expect. "Are you based in Austin?" I almost didn't respond. But something in me, maybe the version of me that had grown a spine on that bus, typed back, "Yes, just moved, long story." Her reply came in seconds. "Meet me, tomorrow, 10 a.m., wear confidence." I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't own anything close to confidence, not in fabric form, but I figured if I showed up and didn't fold in on myself, that would be enough. That night, I stood in front of the mirror above my desk, brushing out my hair with nervous hands. I didn't recognize the girl staring back. She looked older, tired maybe, but there was something steadier in her eyes, a flicker of resolve. I whispered to her, "This is where it changes." And for once, I believed it. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The city was still quiet, the streets not yet buzzing with traffic or chatter. I stood at the window with a mug of instant coffee warming my hands, watching the bakery lights flicker on below. Ruth moved like clockwork, flipping the sign to open, tying her apron without ever glancing up. I pulled on the cleanest outfit I had, a black turtleneck, dark jeans, and boots that didn't scuff too loudly on the stairs. I wasn't dressed to impress. I was dressed to hold myself together. Marianne's office was tucked inside a glass building downtown, surrounded by trees that didn't belong in the heat and benches no one sat on. I checked in at the front desk with shaky hands and rode the elevator in silence, floor 12 lighting up like a promise. When I stepped inside, she was already waiting. Marianne stood by the window, all posture and presence. She was older than I expected, early 40s, maybe, but everything about her felt ageless. Sharp eyes, calm smile, a kind of gravity that pulled the air toward her. "You made it," she said, not as a greeting but a quiet acknowledgement. I nodded. "Thanks for meeting me." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Tell me your story." My throat tightened, not because I didn't know where to begin, but because no one had ever asked. Not like that. Not without suspicion or judgment or the need to fix me. Just tell me. So I did. Not every detail, but enough. The ticket, the silence, the bakery, the design gigs, the ache of starting over with no applause and no audience. Marianne didn't interrupt, didn't blink too hard. She listened like I was saying something important. When I finished, she leaned back and folded her hands. "You've got something," she said simply. I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" An eye. A voice. And maybe more importantly, grit. People underestimate the quiet ones, but I don't. I was one. That's when I knew. She saw it. Not just the art, not just the potential. Me. "I want to bring you on," she said. "Part-time, flexible hours. We're building fast, and I need someone who understands branding from the inside out. You've lived what we're trying to express." I stared at her, blinking. "You're serious?" She smiled, amused. "I don't invite people to this office for therapy, sweetheart. I'm very serious." I wanted to cry then, not from sadness, but from the sudden, dizzying weight of being seen. But I didn't. I smiled back. I won't let you down. I know, she said, already reaching for a folder. And don't worry about transport. I'll have someone pick you up for meetings until you get your footing. The meeting ended as smoothly as it began. No dramatic contracts, no handshake deals, just understanding, just trust. As I stepped into the elevator again, the city stretched out beneath me. A new world, a new role. It felt like a door had opened. Not to escape, but to become. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I felt like I was beginning. A week passed, then another. The days melted into quiet rituals. Morning coffee, client calls, afternoon sketches in the bakery window light. Ruth started saving the corner croissant for me without asking. Marianne's driver showed up like clockwork, never late, never loud. Life had a rhythm now. Not perfect, not easy, but mine. And just when it started to feel safe, they reached out. It was a message. From Caleb, of course. He didn't call. He never did. His texts always came with that same cold entitlement, like I owed him something for the simple fact of being born second. Dinner Saturday. Everyone's home. You should come. Mom said so. Mom said so. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button, heart slowing, not speeding up, not fear, not even confusion. Just anger, the quiet kind. The kind that simmers behind your ribs like heat you forgot was still there. They really thought they could summon me like a lost dog, as if I'd been sitting by the door this whole time, waiting for a breadcrumb of acknowledgement, like the bus ticket never happened, like the silence didn't matter. That's when the idea arrived. It wasn't born out of spite. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like truth. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to argue or beg or perform for their approval. I wanted them to see what they'd chosen to ignore. Not to punish them, but to free myself. I opened my phone and typed a message to Marianne. Do you think your driver could help me make an impression Saturday night? Her reply came back fast. Limo or something bolder? I smiled for the first time in days. Both. That night, I pulled out my sketchbook and flipped past the client drafts, past the logos and flyers, until I landed on a blank page. I began to draw, not for work, not for money, but for me. It started with a silhouette, not elegant, not flashy, just strong. A figure standing alone, upright, unshaken. This wasn't just a plan, it was a mirror, and I was finally ready to show them what they threw away. Saturday arrived the way storms do, slow at first, then all at once. I spent the morning pacing the edges of my room, fingers brushing over the fabric I'd chosen with care. Not flashy, not loud, but precise. A black jumpsuit, fitted but understated, with a low back that whispered power without ever having to raise its voice. Gold studs for earrings, nude heels. A shade of lipstick I had never dared to wear before that day, deep red, like a line drawn in silence. I didn't want to look rich, I wanted to look untouchable. At 5 p.m. sharp, the limo pulled up outside the bakery. Ruth peeked through the front window, flower on her cheek, and gave me a single knowing nod. No words, just that. And somehow it was more than enough. The driver opened the door with a small smile. I stepped in, breath slow, heart steady. The leather seats wrapped around me like armor. The city blurred past the tinted windows, but I wasn't watching it. I was watching me, in the reflection. When we turned onto my old street, nothing had changed. Same white house with trimmed hedges, same gleaming driveway, same car Caleb polished like it was part of his identity. But I had changed. I felt it in my spine, in the way I sat taller without even trying. Give me 2 minutes before you open the door, I told the driver. He nodded. I checked my lipstick one last time, brushed a wrinkle from my jumpsuit. Then I texted Caleb, be there in 5. He replied with a thumbs up. Of course he did. I could imagine the scene inside already. Elise probably commenting on the store-bought rolls she pretended to bake, Michael fake reading a news article on his phone, Caleb basking in his usual spotlight. I wondered if they even set a place for me. Then I realized it didn't matter. The limo slowed, then stopped. Tires crunched softly over the driveway gravel. The driver stepped out, came around, and opened the door. I stepped out. The air shifted. 3 faces stood frozen on the porch. Elise, arms crossed like a shield. Michael behind her, unreadable as ever. Caleb by the steps, grin faltering. No one spoke. I didn't smile, I didn't wave. I just stood there, poised, silent, radiant in the kind of way pain sometimes polishes a person. Well, Caleb said finally, his voice forced casual, someone's trying hard tonight. There was something tight behind the sarcasm, confusion, maybe even threat. Elise's eyes narrowed. "You came in a limo?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Where'd you get the money for that?" I tilted my head, just slightly. "I didn't come to impress you," I said, my tone even, like glass held steady. "I came to show you what you let go." Caleb scoffed, but no one laughed with him. Even he could feel it. Something was different now. Elise turned. "Dinner's getting cold. If you're coming in, come in." She walked away without waiting. Caleb followed. Michael lingered for a second longer, then nodded at me, almost like a sorry he couldn't say out loud. I waited until they disappeared inside, and then I walked toward the door, heels tapping softly against the stone, carrying with them the weight of every time I had been ignored, erased, dismissed. But not tonight. Tonight, I was undeniable. The dining room hadn't changed, same over-decorated table, same wine bottle no one would admit Caleb wasn't old enough to drink from, same silence, the kind that doesn't welcome, just waits. They all sat. No one asked me how I was. No one asked why I hadn't written. They just resumed. It was like I'd never left. And that's when I realized they hadn't changed. But I had. I picked up my fork, placed it back down. The food was warm, but the room was ice. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. "So what? You're rich now?" I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time he looked small, still orbiting their approval like it was oxygen, still pretending his spotlight was earned, not handed. "No," I said, my voice calm, "but I'm free, and I'm doing better without you." Elise scoffed. "Don't act like we didn't give you anything." I tilted my head slightly. "You're right, you did." She blinked. "What?" I leaned forward, elbows soft against the edge of the table. "A one-way bus ticket." Silence. Thick, heavy, unmistakable. That was the moment they knew. I hadn't come to plead. I hadn't come to gloat. I'd come to draw a line. I stood up slowly, brushing invisible dust from my sleeves. "I don't need this dinner. I don't need this house. And I don't need your love." Then softer, stronger. "I don't need you." No one moved. Not Caleb, not Elise, not even Michael, who just stared at the table like it might offer him an answer. I walked to the door. Each step echoed, not with drama, but with decision. The limo door opened. I slid in. As we pulled away, the house grew smaller behind tinted glass. Just a building now. Not a wound. Just a place I once existed. And I didn't feel sadness. I felt stillness. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I sat by the window of my little room above the bakery and watched the stars blink above Austin's skyline. I thought about how no one chased after me. No one said wait, or sorry, or stay. And it didn't hurt. That was the real surprise. For the first time, I wasn't trying to escape anything. I had already arrived. In my own life. Weeks passed. I moved out of the bakery. Marianne promoted me to creative lead. I rented a loft downtown, my first real place. My name on the lease. My choice of paint. My silence. And on the wall near the door, I hung a small black frame. Inside it, the one-way ticket. People asked if it was art. I smiled and told them the truth. It's the beginning. I don't talk to them anymore. Not because I hate them, but because I stopped needing answers from people who never learned how to give them. I gave myself the closure. I gave myself the freedom. I gave myself the chance they never offered me. And if you're listening, wondering if you're strong enough to walk away, you are. You don't need applause or permission or proof. You just need a beginning, even if it comes in the form of a one-way ticket.